Okay, so before we start, a little bit about me. So if you don't know me already, my name is Andreas Müller. I'm a MAXQDA trainer. And yeah, I always joke that I spend more time with MAXQDA than with Netflix. And it's true, although I have a Netflix account, but usually it's about 5 days of the week with MAXQDA and maybe one or two with Netflix. I'm a freelancer, so I work as a research consultant, as a trainer, teaching the software to people, and I also do data analysis for clients. So I'm not directly working for Verbi, the company that makes MAXQDA, but I'm somewhere close to them, who they also ask to give introductory webinars, such as this one. It's exactly 3 o'clock. We're a couple of people, but let's see if more will drop in. I will tell you already a little bit about what we are trying to achieve today. So first of all, what are the goals of today's workshop? First of all, I want to give you an overview of the visual tools function of MAXQDA. And that's a challenge by itself because MAXQDA has many different visual tool functions and they're getting more and more every day. And if you would just spend 10 minutes per visual tool, we would still be here in a couple of hours. So I will, on one hand, try to give you an overview so that you can actually see what are the tools out there and what they can be used for. And on the other hand, I want also to go a little bit deeper with some specific tools where I think they can be useful for most researchers. And I want that apart from getting this overview, that you understand the potentials and implications of visualizing data. Because that's something that's very important to me as a trainer, because often visual tools are very tempting and you quickly use them with, in the worst case, not understanding them completely. And then you need to, then you try to make sense of them and maybe you make some invalid interpretations. So for that, I will also give you some guidance today. So what's the content for today? So today we want to look, first of all, what's the objective of using visual tools? Like, why do we even visualize? What could be the goal of that? And there are different reasons why you might want to do so. And then we will look into different types of visualizations. For this, I have grouped them into single case visualizations that are usually based on a single document, multi-case visualizations that are used to compare across different documents or cases, visualizations that display code relationships. So how are they related? Do they occur? And what I have called additional visualizations that fall somehow in neither of these categories. That's my own rough systematization of visualization tools, but to give you some guidance so you can think, what do I want to try to achieve and what's the appropriate tool for that? And in the end, we will talk a little bit about prerequisites to visualizations and limitations of visualizations. So why do we want to use visual tools and how does it work? In most cases, although not in all cases, visual tools in MAXQDA rely on visualizing coded data. So in most cases, you will first code your data and later visualize it. That comes with its own challenge because the way that you code your data strongly impacts how and why you would even visualize them. So if you code in a specific way, this can be helpful for some visualizations, but not so helpful for others. So first there's the code and then there's the visualization. I said for almost all because, for example, you have the word cloud, where we just get word frequencies displayed. There you do not need previous coding, but for all, in my opinion, sophisticated and really useful visualizations, you need to have done some coding at least. Now, why do you want to visualize data? And I think the obvious reason is reason number 3. You want to present your results. you have your results. You want to show them in an illustrative, convincing way. You have them on your posters, on your presentations, or you just show it to your colleagues to explain to them what you have found. That's one thing, but I don't think it's the most important one. And it's just one of three, because there's also that you want to visualize data to explore your data and to verify your applied codes. So you might use visual tools to discover new insights, to find something new, to spot a pattern that you haven't noticed before and then find an explanation for it. Or you might use it to verify your applied codes, to quality check on yourself, to see if your coding was consistent, for example. It's very different from just presenting results, because you don't know what you will find yet. It's not just about showing what you already know, but it's also about finding new insights and quality checking on yourself. And the second one, I have easy now turned upside down the order a bit, is just to navigate your data and to query your data. That's a way that I like to use it, just as a roadmap into your data. You quickly want to retrieve some data. Sometimes the quickest way is to call up a visual tool and press the right button. These are three ways why we want to use visualizations. But what visualizations are there and what are they good for? Let's start with the simplest visualizations, single case visualizations. That means you always have a single document. I will show you all visual tools, but some of them will be just here on the slides, and some other I will present you in MAXQDA live so that you can actually see what they are. We start currently we have 4 single case visualizations: the document portrait, the code line, the word trends, and the code and category trends. Here you see the document portrait and the code line, both of them typical single case visualizations. The document portrait here makes great use of color. It shows you when and where in your document, what color, what code appears. We see here, for example, that this document starts with the red code resource and climate, and in what order the other codes follow. In this setting here, it doesn't allow for any gaps. You could also say, please show where I haven't coded any data. In my personal opinion, such a document portrait is like a great first view, a quick glance at the document to see, okay, what comes up here, but it's not, in my opinion, so useful for very sophisticated analysis. You can put 2 document portraits next to each other, of course, to compare them, for example, as anchor cases, but they are not so, and there's no such deep interpretation required here, because you could also just like get some code frequencies and also see what comes up. The code line, on the other hand, is a tool that I personally like a lot, especially for analyzing focus groups. I will show you an example in just a second. What the code line does is it's similar in the structure to the document portrait, that it displays where in the document what code comes up and what code co-occurs. I will show you an example in the example project. So here you go. So here we have an example project, and here we have, where is it? Here's the focus group. A focus group is basically a document with several speakers. I will just activate this here to just get a quick glance at where the various speakers are talking and what turns they are taking. Here I can just right-click and hit code line. I limit it here. Wait a second. I want to limit it only to the focus group speakers, because that's what I'm interested in at the moment. So here we go. Code line, only for the activated documents. Okay. And then we see this. So we see here, for example, this is now one document, one focus group. 5 different people speak in this document: a moderator, Olga, Fatima, Andy, and Pranav. And we see what turns they take. So we see here what first the moderator talks, then Olga, then Fatima, then Andy, and then the moderator again, then Andy again. So you see who is talking. You see that they don't overlap in their talking, and you see in the order basically here on to the left is the first paragraph, and here to the right is the last paragraph. So you see here that the moderator and Olga have a little discussion at the end of the document. You can also, of course, do this with thematic codes. Let's have a look for some thematic codes, focus group themes we have here. Let's call that up only for this. Here you see now both at the same time. So we see here that they first talk about motivations for getting a student job. Then is the topic effects on the studies, psychological effects, flexibility, leisure time, and so on. So you see here how they shift from one topic to another, and down here you could read who is taking turns. So it's always about exploring a single document and the code dynamics within this document. So let me just have a quick look. Okay, so that are two of these 4 tools. So we saw the document portrait. It's just a quick overview what codes appear where, and the code line is more detailed. You see even what codes run in parallel, what turns are being taken, what are the dynamics within one document. The second group here in single case visualizations are the word trends and code category trends. Both of them are rather new visual tools that have been introduced very recently. What they do is they show you, for example, the word trends, where in a document, how frequently what word occurs. So we see here, for example, that the word democracy occurs 5 times in the beginning of this speech. In the first, so it's here split up in 10 sections. In the first section, the word democracy appears 5 times. Then in the second section, it doesn't appear. In the third section, it appears 1 time again. And then here in the last section, it comes up 2 times again. So it's a bit similar to the code line, but more focused here on frequencies. You see where in a single document, what codes or what words appear. Here these are the words America, American, nation, democracy. And here we see the code trends. So we see, for example, the code democracy related codes are common in the beginning, and then it doesn't appear, and in the end it comes up again. Or here nation related codes, we see the dynamic within the documents. All these visualizations target to actually show us how a dynamic is for one document. What is frequent, what is rare, what is in the beginning, what is in the end. That's what single case visualizations mostly show us. It's you could see it as a rough visual summary of your single document. If you want to portray what was said, this can help you. Here, of course, especially with these two, with these two here, the choice in color is important. It's often quite difficult to figure out how many different colors you should use, because if you use too many, it might get overwhelming. If you use too little, you might blur your results. So here, the choice of color is very important, but you can adjust that later on very easily. You can quickly say, okay, let's change this color later on. So it's not a key decision in the beginning. But if your visualizations don't tell you anything, maybe you want to adjust the colors. I will quickly show you, just because it's a new feature, where you find the word trends. Here for this, I have also a project file. Here it is, trends project file. So here we have the initial speeches of various American presidents, and we can pick here the president. You see the data here is uncoded. That's interesting with the word trends, that you can also do that with uncoded data. And then I pick maybe Obama here, and then I say visual tools, word trends. I would just want to see a trend of the word frequencies for, in this case, a single document. And we have here a lemmatization and a stop list applied to make sure that there are really only interesting words that come up here. We can also remove or add a new word. We can like say here applause. Well, that word is not helpful. New is also not helpful. Maybe the word great, we want to use that one. And we can see where the word great appeared. You see here also you shouldn't use too many words at the same time, else it will get a little bit messy. But you see here, okay, it starts with nation 3 times in the first section, then just 2 times, then it goes down. And here in the end, it's all about America. 3 times the word America appears in the last 10% of this graph. Let's look at great, just because I wanted to see. This is not Trump, this is Obama, but let's see what he said. Oh, yeah, and as you might have noticed, there's a new MAXQDA version out, MAXQDA 2024, MAXQDA 24, without 20 they call it. It comes with new visualization tools, such as this one, but as it sometimes happens, it can be that there is still a bug that needs to be fixing in the first few days. I noticed, I shouldn't have risked it, that sometimes if I delete a word here, yeah, it starts spinning a little bit, but we can actually see our answer here with people. People here appeared in the 6th and 8th segment of the document. And here, great. You see great and people goes up at the same time. Maybe there's a connection here. So these are single case visualizations. I will just kill MAXQDA and go back to my PowerPoint. So these are single case visualizations. As I said, they are basically a visual summary of a single document, but they are not in itself, they are not like, usually not the key insight of your thesis. They are more exploratory, or if you want to, especially if you're working with types of documents, you say, I have various types that I want somehow to display, then you could select key anchor cases and use single case visualizations to illustrate them. Much more interesting, at least in my humble opinion, are the multi-case visualizations. Here we have, as the name suggests, several cases, several documents that allow us to compare coding across documents. I will show you especially the Code Metrics browser. I think it's one of the most useful visual tools in my personal opinion. Like in almost every research project or with almost every one of my clients, we open up the Code Metrics browser at some point, either because we want to actually analyze the data or just for quality checking. It's also a very helpful tool. I will show you the Code Metrics browser and then the document comparison chart. And about the other 3, I will just talk a bit more briefly. Let's look into the Code Metrics browser. By now, MAXQDA is back. Yeah, let's look at the work-life balance example project, just that you can also try this with your own data. So we can here, and one key thing about all visualizations is that you have actually a question that you are asking yourself or asking the visualization. Here, I want to see in these interviews, what did they say about, I'm looking here for the work-life balance codes, and I will just take these. How many are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 codes. I'm not interested in all the codes, because a common mistake with visual tools is that you try to visualize everything everywhere all at once. It's a great movie, but it's not a good visualization strategy. So here we just picked 2 sets of interviews and our work-life balance codes. And what the Code Metrics browser does is it shows us the distribution of code frequencies across documents, as you can read here if you hover above it. I'll give it a quick look, hit OK. And what we see here is it's basically a matrix or a table, a cross table. And let's first look at the raw numbers. What it does here is it tells us that the code education occurs in the first interview by Selim 1 time, by Tan here 1 time, Chris 4 times, Anne 2 times, and then 1 time, 1 time, 1 time. You can also get our summaries over here, our sums, so that we see how many times is that in total. And now it's getting interesting because we see here friends and family, for example. Just by the numbers, we see that it occurs in every document. Everyone talks about friends and family. There's no exception at all. But some talk about it 7 times and just some talk about it 1 time. Childcare, on the other hand, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people talk about. Well, because maybe some people don't have children. So we can switch here back to the symbols view here. This is just an approximation of like how frequent is this code, in this case compared to the overall number of coded segments. You can also do it like this, and it's a bit more meaningful that our calculation refers to the column. So it would then say here, for example, let's go to the number 7 out of 17, 2 out of 7. That's what we get by column. Then, in my opinion, usually the column is a good visualization strategy here for the code metrics browser. So we see here, Selim talks a lot about friends, Tan too. Here, childcare, again, it's just a few people, and domestic work too, 1, 2, 3, 4 people. So, and then you see we can use this to spot patterns. We see here that this person talks about domestic work and childcare. This one here about domestic work and childcare, domestic work and childcare. Then there are some people who don't talk about both of them. So we can see how frequently distributed are our codes. That helps us to understand how grounded are our codes. Like, are they very widespread in our data, or are they just coming from a single document? And it helps us to quality check on our coding. Like here on education, we see, if we go back to the numbers, we see that Riley didn't talk about education, but maybe we had a question in our questionnaire, in our interview guideline, that explicitly says, please tell me about your aspirations in education. Then we might wonder, did we just forget to code Riley, actually? So this is a great tool to quality check on your coding. If your code system reflects in part your research guideline, your interview guideline, you can use this to make sure that you haven't missed anything. If you see gaps here, you might wonder, maybe I forgot about them. Or as we saw here, we can use it to identify some patterns or understand what codes are rare or frequent. Also, a very useful feature in MAXQDA is that all these tools are interactive. So if I now say here, for example, the 2 statements about domestic work, where there's no childcare, I want to see what they are, these 2 statements. I can double click here, and MAXQDA will automatically retrieve these 2 statements. Taking care of the household, buying food, and cleaning. Relatively even, I would say, because I also drive the car, I also do shopping. Yeah, they really don't talk about children. Here it's about my girlfriend, so maybe this person doesn't have children, but also has domestic responsibilities. So you see here on all these numbers, you can double click on one of them and you immediately get the coded segments that they reflect, that are behind them. So that's the code metrics browser, helps you to understand the distribution of codes across various documents. You can also use it you can see that here in the settings, to use document groups instead of codes. Then you could look at the distribution among groups or sets or even focus group speakers. But the most common one is here for documents. That's why I wrote cases, not documents, because you could also use groups for that purpose. Okay, then the document comparison chart. For that, I will show you my personal favorite illustration or visualization that was very insightful for me and that I still consider pretty. I will go into my master thesis from 10 years ago, something like that, 8 years ago. Sometimes I forget how old I am. And what it's not important what kind of a project it is, but here we can look at our codes with the document comparison chart. And the document comparison chart is similar to the code line, the line that you saw with the focus group speakers, but it does the same across various documents at the same time. They help us to break down the structure and see if there's a common structure to our documents. I click here, document comparison chart, and you will immediately see what I mean by it's pretty. It looks here like this. Here I just have 5 colors: red, black, brown, blue, and I think it's turquoise. I'm very green colorblind, but you get there's the 5th color. And what we see here is every line here is one document. Document number 1, document number 2, document number 3, document number 4. And every column here is one paragraph. The 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. And the colors reflect our code system. So the colors I used here. And what you can see here, these are legal documents from courts in the 16th century. You can see here that in paragraph 3 to 6, there was always the red topic, always the pact with the devil. It's here. And here then between 7 and 9, it's blue and turquoise. That's a specific section. And then in the end, there's always the black code, and the black code varies in length. So you see here that the documents here follow a very clear content-wise structure. They first talk about how they meet the devil, then they talk about how they meet other witches, presumed witches, and then what evil magic they did. And they always follow this sort of narrative structure, although they are legal documents. If you use this with interviews, you will often see the interview guideline coming through. That means if your codes are similar to the topics of your interview guideline, your colors will somehow reflect the interview guideline. But this will also help you to understand who spent a lot of time on a certain section of your interview guideline and who just skipped it very quickly. Because you will see here that it takes up more space or less space. So very similar to the code line, but it's basically 19 code lines next to each other. That's also why I think it's a more useful tool than the code line, unless you are very interested in very close examination of interactions between different people. In focus groups, for example, there the code line is just more precise for a single document. This one here is great for spotting patterns. That's the document comparison chart. Also, if you think, wow, okay, that's pretty fast, because of course we have a lot of visual tools, you also get the recording of this session, so you can just listen into a single tool again if you like. And again, my goal is not so much to make you absolute experts on one tool, but that you understand what tools are out there so that you can target your coding and your research to them if you decide that's what I need for my research. So that were the two tools that I wanted to show you here. Then we have more. Of course, we always have more. The document map and the profile comparison chart. The document map is a very interesting visual multi-case visualization tool, but again, it's not so easy to use. It's basically a cluster analysis that clusters your documents based on similarities. And the question is, what factors do you add into your cluster analysis? So you could say, I have here 10 codes. Please cluster the documents based on how often these codes appear. And we would then see, okay, here's one cluster in blue. Here's another cluster of 2 documents. Here's another cluster of 2 documents. And the distance between them basically means how similar or different is the coding that was used on these documents. So if 2 documents would end up exactly on the same spot, it would mean that they got the same codes with the same frequency, exactly the same codes with exactly the same frequency. And if they are very far apart, then it would mean that they have basically no codes in common at all. And this can help you if you want to identify types in your data, if you want to build a topology of your data and you want to like build clusters, you can then not only include codes here, but also document variables that can also be considered in this cluster analysis. But in the end, it comes down to understanding, okay, these four documents here are somehow similar in the codes that they address. You could follow this up, for example, with the code metrics browser or the document comparison chart to better understand in what sense are they similar. But it is, in its essence, a cluster analysis. The profile comparison chart looks a little bit different to the word and code trends. On one hand, it also visualizes to you code trends, but it also allows you to visualize other variables. So here, for example, we have the variable, how many children does someone have? And then we see here, how much do they talk about childcare? So we see here that one person, I think it's Selim, talks about childcare 4 times and also has 3 children. And then another person here talks about childcare about 3 times, also have 3 children. So you can use this to try and spot connections, especially between codes and variables. It's often interesting to pick a variable where you think it might impact the codes so that you can then see, is there usually like what lines exist here? Are there similar patterns? Do people who have a lot of domestic work, do they say very little about childcare? Is that a common topic? Or is this, here we see, for example, that 1, 2, 3, 4, in most cases, domestic work, if someone does domestic work, it goes rather up. And here we have one person where it goes rather down to childcare. So there's one person with doing domestic work and doing no childcare at all. But in most cases, it goes up from here. So it could help you, or similar to the document map, to try to spot patterns in your data, or to see if there are similar trends in your data. The special thing about the profile comparison chart is, unlike the code or word trends, that you can integrate variables into this one too. And the last 2 ones, but they are very similar, are again the multi-case word and code trends. I will show them, demonstrate them, the word trends to you again, also because it's a comparatively new feature in MAXQDA 24. So we have seen earlier, I will go back to the same document, to the same project. Here we have the trends project file. You remember we had one speech by Obama, and we looked into what words are frequent or rare within this speech. But it's actually, in my opinion, more interesting to see across documents. So here we have the 2001 speech by Bush, 2005 speech by Bush, George W., 2009 by Obama, 2013 by Obama, then Trump, and then Biden. And we want to see if maybe the word great came up more frequently or rarely or whatever. And we want to see it across documents. So for that, we can go here to the visual tools feature. Let's see, my Zoom interface is a bit above that. Here it is. We go again to word trends, and now we go to multiple documents. We can select the documents again. Let's take all of them. They are already sorted in because we chose to sort them in the document system in the right order. Here we go. And then now we see here, for example, Bush talked a lot about freedom in 2001. Maybe you have an idea where that might be. That word then came down and wasn't as popular ever since. The word freedom seems to be a big word in the Bush speech of 2001. In 2005, he didn't use it much more. On the other hand, the word nation here has a more stable curve. Yeah. Let's look at the word great. I want to see it. I want to see if it goes crazy with Obama, with Trump. Doesn't seem like it. I mean, there are other reasons to say great, except for make America great again. So we see it's a very stable trend. All documents use the word great about 5 times. Maybe Trump wasn't as special as I thought in that case. But we see here that he used the word America in this speech 20 times. But Biden did too. Maybe that's a trend of that time. So here you see you can analyze word frequencies across documents, which makes it, in my opinion, much more interesting than just a single speech. You can use this for all kinds of longitudinal studies. You can also use this, I will show it in another document. You can also use this for code trends. So to see how the frequency of code changed over time or across various documents. Let's see, I don't have an ideal example set here, but let's just take these interviews here and see. Let's just have a look at the code trends for the work-life balances section. So here, code trends. Again, you have single document and multi-document analysis options. Let's have a click here. We want only the activated documents. Again, visual tools, it's key that you always activate certain documents and codes, because if you do it for everything, you will probably not see a lot, even with the best visual tools, because there's just so much noise by too many documents, too many codes. But if you limit it, okay, we see here the word work-life balance is obviously the most frequent word here, has quite a trend here. Riley does use the word just 7 times, and here with Tash, it's 17 times. It's a bit surprising. Maybe it has to do with the interviewer, how they ask these questions. Or education. Let's have a look at education. Here, Chris mentions education 4 times. Riley doesn't mention it at all. That's, you remember, we saw the same in the Code Metrics browser. Riley doesn't mention education as the only person among them. So it's basically the same information as in the Code Metrics browser, but in a more, it's more like a trend line. Of course, this tool also suggests certain ways of using it or of reading it, because it suggests that there's like a linear change in some way, which the Code Metrics browser doesn't suggest so strongly. But it can be very interesting for longitudinal analysis. For example, a client of mine works with diaries, where people keep a diary for 28 days. And then you could see maybe how happy or unhappy people were, and if it changed within these 28 days, when were the peaks of happiness and when were the peaks of and the valleys of sadness. If you want to think of it like that, it can be very interesting for a longitudinal analysis. Okay, these are the multi-case visualizations. So we had Code Metrics browser, you compared in frequencies, distribution, document comparison chart to break down the structure. Document map is for clustering, profile comparison chart for combining codes and variables, and the case and code trends to see how words, the word and code trends to see how words or codes change in frequency from one document to another. Then we have 2 more documents, 2 more visualization tools that focus on code relationships. The obvious choice is the Code Relations browser. What these visualization tools do is they look if codes occur together at the same segment or within the same document, depending on your setting. Here, for example, we have a code positive and a code negative. And this is just like, do people say something positive about something, or do they say something negative? And then we have codes like education, friends, family, and we can see where are people happy or unhappy. I will show you how to set that up in the work-life balance example here, because this tool, the code relations browser, is very interesting if you have like a multi-dimensional code system where you have like assessments of positive or negative, where you have topics and stakeholders and you want to bring them together. But this requires that you actually do the work of assigning several codes to the same segment. Let's have a look how that works. Let's reset our codes here. And I want to have the work. And the code relations browser is also a visual tool that's a bit tricky to set up. So here I first activate the work-life balance codes, because these are the codes that I want as my rows. And then I will explain to you the browser in more detail. Here as the rows, I want to have all activated codes. And here in the columns, I will just pick negative and positive. These are the code concurrences that I want to look at. And here I say intersection at the same segment. I hit OK. And I should get something very similar to before. So here you now see we can look at the actual numbers. 18 times friends and family are mentioned in a negative context. Like, I'm not happy because I don't see my friends often enough, maybe. Or 10 times they are mentioned in a positive context. Like, I'm very happy for the support of my family, maybe. So we see here 18 times negative, 10 times positive. Then we see here the free time and self-care, for example, is 5 times negative, 1 times positive. Means whenever they talk about free time and self-care, they mostly say that they don't have enough, right? So again, here we can retrieve the data with just double click and see if that's actually true. Actually, I'm certainly satisfied with my free time, positive assessment of free time. And you see here, if I click on that, here it is. It's not so easy to see. Wait a second. I'll limit that a bit for you so that you're better able to spot what I want to show you. So here we see free time and self-care was assigned here, and the code positive was also assigned. So this, the code relations browser recognizes to give us this analysis. And so here we can then see, okay, friends and family, most are unhappy with it. Education, it's a bit like this, like that. Work-life separation, people are maybe rather happy. We can here too choose between the various options of how we want to display that. In this particular example, I would calculate it based on the row to see friends and family, is it more negative or more positive? And this will bring out the result even clearer for us. Childcare, it's a bit like this, a bit like that. Domestic work, apparently, no, we didn't assign negative or positive here. So if you want to go for such an analysis, you need to keep in mind that you need to assign several codes at the same segment to actually use this kind of analysis. So in my opinion, code relations browser are a very powerful tool, very interesting for multidimensional analysis of a multidimensional code system, but you need to prepare for it in your coding already, because if you just use codes exclusively and there are no co-occurrences in your data, you can do nothing with it. Then the second tool here is the code map. It's very similar to the document map. It's a cluster analysis of codes in this case. This will show us which codes have been used in a similar way. Like before, we had which documents are coded in a similar way, and here we see which codes are used in a similar way. So this can tell us if codes maybe occur together. So let's have a look here. Free time and self-care and the typical workday are used in a very similar way. They are used on the same documents or in the same text segments. In workplace, career, and education also are codes that are often used together. So this is more for a It's also sort of factor analysis of your code system, and it can help you to spot if some codes are used in a very similar way. Maybe that's an interesting relationship, or maybe these codes are very similar and you might think about merging them. Can help you to review your code system. But again, you need to be careful how you set up your settings. And it's pretty hard to actually interpret these code clusters. I think it's harder to interpret than the document maps, which have a more straightforward solution. Other visualization tools. We have now seen quite a lot of them. I already mentioned the word cloud in the beginning. The word cloud is based on a word frequency. The word cloud allows you to just see basically a frequency table, and the words that are highlighted are the words that are big, are the words that are common. So here we see work, husband, time, working, but you also see office, friends, employer. But you see here already one challenge of using word clouds. You need to apply a stop list so that commonly used words like do, would, go, words that don't carry much meaning are sorted out. I will show you a quick example of how you use the word cloud. Let's take just any of these interviews, Selim, we hit here, right click, word cloud. And then we can here use a stop list for English. That's already helpful. Can even lemmatise them. And then we see here, it talks about time, about home, about appointments, about family. And the nice thing here is that you can click on a word and then it will immediately give you all the statements. Here we see family has 13 hits. I can click here and now we get the 13 hits for where Selim talked about family. We can even auto-code it. A nice exploratory tool, but personally, I prefer to work with a word frequency table instead because it's just more objective. But for visualizing your content, especially for a poster, the word cloud might be a nice start or a nice for a nice illustration purpose. Then we have the code frequencies. It's very straightforward. I mean, if you have ever done any quantitative analysis, you will be familiar with like a bar chart or a pie chart. You can just, for example, here show subcode frequencies to see here from the work-life balance codes, which one are the most frequent one or which one are the rarest one. But I want to use the last minutes we have to show you Max Maps, because it's one of my absolutely favorite visual tools in MAXQDA, because it's one of the very few options where you can visualize results without them being necessarily quantifications of your data. So they don't need to be based on numbers. I will show you quickly where you find visual tools, and then I will show you an elaborate example of how you might want to use it. Max Maps we find also here under visual tools, like all the other visual tools that we have covered so far. You see we have covered all of them except for Max Maps so far. Max Maps is basically a mind mapping tool that works with MAXQDA elements. You can just say, I want to create a new map here, and then you can drag and drop elements from your MAXQDA interface here. I can grab documents here. I can link them if I want to. I can maybe put an arrow here. I can also draw direct codes over here. I can drag memos over here. You can use it in a very free and creative way. You can also take a coded segment here. If we see one, spot one, just a second. Here they are. I can also take a single coded segment here. So you can build something out of MAXQDA elements. What's a big advantage compared to like a normal mind mapping tool, which I also love to use, is that these things remain alive. So I can here salary budget, I can double click it. and I immediately get the statements that were coded. I can double click on this document, and MAXQDA immediately takes me into this document. I can have this statement here. I can double click, and MAXQDA calls up the corresponding statement. It's an interactive, live map of your data. You don't have to build it from scratch, but you can also use document or code models that allow you an interesting starting point. For example, here, the two-case model allows you to compare two, for example, interview documents here. And what it does here is it shows us what codes these two documents have in common here in the middle, and what codes they don't have in common. And we can use this model and then freely manipulate or change it, delete something. Maybe the word positive, maybe we don't need that, maybe that's enough. And we can use this as a starting base. Especially if you are doing grounded theory and you want to really build a model in the end, or even a theory in the end, this can be very helpful. I show you just an example of how a very sophisticated model or reorganization of your code system can look like. It's in German, but it's just for the visual effect to understand what's going on here. So here, this is a project I've done. And you see here, I used this to organize the open coding into this model. And here I also used the lines to actually describe the relationship between the codes. How are they related to each other? What do they say about each other? And this is not a tool for displaying results necessarily. It's a tool for ordering your results to understand your data better and to get a new perspective on your data. This model here I have then also reduced because my supervisor said, I cannot understand this. So I made here a reduced version and an even further reduced version. So I said, like, okay, the key driving factor in my model are these three codes. How do they relate to each other? How do they split up? What contradictions are there in the data? There are many different creative ways you can use max maps to visualize your qualitative data. Without here, there is no quantification. These codes are not big because they are frequent. They are big because they are important, because I consider them to be highly relevant concepts, ideas in my data. So that was a tour de force through all of MAXQDA's visualization tools. So I hope you got a nice overview and some ideas how you want to use them. So also your research question will already point you to what tools might be interesting. If you're comparing two groups, maybe the multi-case visualizations will be interesting to you. If you do more like a grounded theory thing, maybe the max maps will be your thing. If you analyze open answers in a survey form, maybe the code frequencies are more relevant to you. But I promised you to also tell you a bit about requirements and limitations. Oh, it says limitations. Yeah, I hope you can forgive me. Limitations is met, of course. So visualizations, I already mentioned this, often implies quantification. So counting data. If something is big or takes up a lot of space, it also means that you coded it frequently. But what this code frequency actually means, it depends on how you code it. Did you code only single words, single sentences, entire paragraphs? And that something is said often doesn't even mean that it's particularly important. For example, people often say, we don't have enough resources. We need more people. We need more money. That's what you find in every study. Yeah, but how could you make better use of the current money? That's not reflected. If we now then say, okay, the biggest and most important code is we need more money, it's maybe not the final conclusion of your research. Also, you've seen, especially with the code relations browser, that specific coding techniques might be needed for certain visual tools. For example, if you don't code so that co-occurrence occurs, no co-occurrence analysis for you. Also, if you want to visualize your results, for example, with the code metrics browser, when it strongly reflects code frequencies, you need to carefully think about how you code, if you code consistently, if your segments have a similar size every time. Yeah, and you also need to consider the data structure. That's also something that can very quickly mislead you. That you see, for example, with the trends we saw before, you see, I had it today in a workshop. We saw that one person talked about children 20 times and the other person just 10 times. Yeah, but the person who talked about them 20 times had a 1-hour interview and the other person had just a half an hour interview. So you cannot immediately compare them. Sometimes longer documents strongly stand out in your code visualizations, but just because they're long, not because they made a stronger point about something. So you need to consider your data structure that's underneath it. How long are your documents? Longer documents will always have more codes than shorter documents, and you need to account for that. Then you often have to go down to percentages or relations in your data. And the most important thing of all is question your visual results. Don't take them as face value. Always ask yourself, first of all, what am I seeing here? Do I understand what this shows to me? Then consider, might this be a coding error or an artifact because of my data structure? Only if you can be sure that you understand it, it's not a coding error, it's not because of the document length or something, and if no other explanation is possible, then maybe there's a content-wise explanation that this person considered it to be more important. And do not use visual tools that you do not understand. You can read up on all the visual tools in the MAXQDA manual. Make sure that you deeply understand them before you use them to present your results. Some final advice. Please differentiate the purpose of using visual tools. You can use a visual tool to discover new insights. That's always very interesting. Or you can just use it to illustrate results that you already know. That's not the same thing. Polishing up your data in the end to show your results in a convincing way is very interesting, but also to discover new insights, it takes a very different approach to using visual tools. Also, less is more. Don't overuse visual tools. Your thesis is not the best because you used all 20 whatever visual tools. Focus on a few meaningful visual tools that actually show what you're interested in. Most of my clients, for them, 2 or 3 visual tools are enough. You don't need 10. Why? Use the best visual tools. Use either the code metrics browser or the code trends or the profile metrics. Why would you use all 3 of them? I see no reason for it. Choose the best one for your research question. And finally, plan in advance. Code with your analysis tools in mind. If you now saw the code relations browser and you're, wow, that's what I need for my research, then find out how you need to code your data so that you can make the best use of it. Finally, a little bit of advertisement. The MQIC, the MAXQDA User Conference, is coming up in February. It's a great place. I will be there. Many MAXQDA users will be in Berlin for a couple of days. It's a very nice opportunity to meet other researchers. For me, this has kicked off my career as a trainer many years ago because I got to talk with the right people. It's a very nice community and they have amazing food in Berlin. My personal recommendation, I will hold a couple of workshops and spotlight sessions, especially focusing on AI in using MAXQDA, AI Assist. And you can just meet me and talk to me. I will definitely be in Berlin in that time. And that's me. I'm Andreas. I'm, as I said, a consultant, a contractual researcher. I give workshops. If you now think, oh, we will really need a workshop for our institution, this guy can do it, reach out to me. Here is my email address. You can also easily find me. Just enter Andreas and MAXQDA. I don't think there are so many people out there with that name. You also find me on YouTube, where I have a bit of content, if you still haven't enough of me. And with that, we end precisely. Thank you for sticking with us. You also get the recording if you want to rewatch it. I know it's a lot of content, but with about 20 visual tools, you get about 3 minutes per tool in 1 hour. And I really wanted to give you a comprehensive overview.